I want to start off by saying that I never thought I'd publicly tell this part of my life story. I hoped that this chapter of my book would end and I could continue my life without thinking about it. I've lived happily since this happened and don't let this part of my life define me. However, I'd be lying if I said this didn't change who I was as a person. I wasn't always apprehensive about trusting folks or wary about booking a room at Comfort Inn and Suites. And I had to alter my life because I knew MamaMax and it wasn't in a good way. I met Max in 2012, 2013 while in high school. We were coworkers at a local movie theater in Wiley, Texas called B&B Theaters. We didn't really speak that much while working there, but he was good friends with most of my coworkers, but he only worked there for a short period of time. We were classmates in a forensic science class our senior year in 2013, 2014. High school. We'd attended the same high school together the entire time, but we didn't really interact with each other until we were in this class together. He and I were lab partners and sat next to each other throughout the school year. In the first semester, so August to December, we became acquaintances and exchanged numbers at some point. We talked every now and then outside of school, but it was very limited and was normally about school events. I had a boyfriend named Dustin at the time who I'd been dating for a year at that point. Dustin and Max knew each other and were somewhat friendly from what I can remember. Like Dustin would walk me to this class and Max would greet him a couple of times per week. So after returning to school from winter break, Max and I became pretty good friends. We would text outside of school almost daily, life events, things like that. I remember confiding in him that I struggled with going to college and wasn't sure where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. I confided in him a lot of the mental illness problems that I had, and he reciprocated this, and we did our best to hype each other up about the future. Max told me he wanted to be a firefighter. That was his plan after high school. During the spring semester of our senior year, Max started telling me that he was struggling with his mental health, and I was under the impression that he had a hard home life. So I did my best to support him and be a friend. We started texting and calling each other on the weekends and after school to discuss our struggles. We would send each other songs and videos that made us laugh or smile. We were pretty much best friends at this point, but I was concerned he may have had feelings for me that I didn't reciprocate. Before prom, I asked Max if he would be going or bringing someone with him. He was kind of hesitant to answer, but ultimately told me that he wasn't planning on going. I encouraged him to go and he could ask my friend Reagan. Reagan was a friend I had in high school, and she told me that she thought Max was cute and how she didn't have a prom date, so I thought that they would be a good match to go. So Max agreed that he would take her to prom as long as I was going to be there, which I told him I would be with Dustin. This video is of Max asking my friend Reagan to prom in 2014, May, I believe.
Are you nervous?
No.
At all?
No. Excuse me! Is that Reagan? Reagan!
During prom, Dustin and I met separately from the rest of our prom group that Reagan and Max were in for photos. Dustin and I did photos at my house and at his parents' house. And then we all met up at a restaurant in Plano called Spaghetti Warehouse before we headed to prom. I told Max there that he looked nice in his suit. He was wearing a white tux, and I, patted him on the shoulder, like the back here, and said, "You look nice." After this, we went to prom. Reagan told me a few years later that Max talked about me the whole time, asking why I wasn't there for photos, saying I looked pretty, should he dance with me, things like that. After prom, Max started texting me more than usual. He kept saying he wanted to be a firefighter and that his calling was to be a firefighter. And of course, I would ask him why he wanted to go into this profession, but Max would deflect and not tell me directly. He also said that firefighter was a code word for something else. I asked him several times over the next, few months what it meant, but he would just laugh at me and change the subject. At graduation, while I was walking the stage, Max screamed my name loudly over the rest of the crowd, including my family, which prompted my dad to ask me who he was. At the time, I enjoyed the praise, so I told my dad who he was. That night, Max texted me asking if I heard him screaming, and I said I did. This was the last time we were supposed to see each other, was graduation day. So we kind of talked about how sad that was, that we wouldn't see each other every day in class. And, it's the end of high school. You tell everybody, we'll miss you, we'll get together, all of those things. And obviously that doesn't ever happen, but that was what we talked about. Throughout the summer of 2014, Max and I kept up our friendship and communicated daily. Again, we were best friends. So I told him about everything that was going on in my life. I told him about my little sister's birthday party, which was happening at the end of June, and he just showed up. I didn't invite him, but I did tell him that it was happening, and he just kind of showed up. I didn't think anything of it, but was a bit weirded out that he knew where my dad's house was. But we were in a smaller town, so I kind of figured he just kind of knew. I don't know. It was a little weird, but I didn't think much of it. He didn't speak the entire time he was there, but was standing close to me throughout the entire day. When my dad asked me why he was there, I lied, saying that I invited him because I didn't want my dad to be mad that someone just showed up uninvited to his house. I also didn't want Max to feel uncomfortable because I knew that he had anxiety problems and wouldn't want him to feel weird about just showing up. So I, de-escalated that. One morning when I was working at the movie theater, Max showed up unannounced in his old uniform. He hadn't worked there for over a year, but walked into the building before, the theater opened. My coworkers thought it was funny, but I felt a little uneasy. Max was asking if he could clock in and clean the theaters. I was on cleaning duty this morning, and while he was there, I didn't approach him and we didn't talk. I texted him later and asked why he showed up. And he said I wanted to work at B&B again, or something along those lines. He apologized for showing up and didn't do it again. After I turned 18, I got my driver's license, and that was in August of 2014. I texted him a photo of my driver's license, and he was happy for me and suggested I should take him for a drive sometime. I joked that he could just show up at work again, like he did that time, and we could drive around Wiley all night long. And I think he took it literally and just showed up to the movie theater after a shift. Although I was surprised he showed up, driving around seemed like a fun way to celebrate, my new license. So I let him in my truck and we drove to the lake, which is about 10 minutes from work. It's in Wiley, or the border of Wiley and Lavon. Once we pulled off into an inlet to one of the parks, we talked about how summer was coming to an end and how I'd be going off to college in 10 days. Max said he was planning on working and becoming a firefighter. So again, I asked him what that meant, and he was just laughing at me. Then he pulled out a tiny little notebook. It's like this big. It's like a little pocket-sized composition book. He gave it to me and said that this was the firefighter. The book was firefighter. He told me to read it once I got home. So I dropped him off at his house. And when I got to my grandma's house, I opened the notebook and began reading it. The notebook was filled completely with tiny scribbles and like little notes. He was able to write like 3 lines of sentences in one little space. So there was a lot of words and stories and stuff. Most of the notes were similar to diary entries, like what happened that day, things like that. And then he started describing, our friendship, like him and I. He talked about how I lit up his day, how he looked forward to seeing me and all of those things. He then brought up Dustin, who was, again, my boyfriend, and how he didn't deserve to have me. He had written out a whole plan on how he would get him out of the picture. I don't fully remember the exact details and don't want to speculate how he would have done it from memory, but I remember it being thorough and violent, and it freaked me out so much that I just threw the book down. I called my friend at the time and told her everything. We both agreed that we wouldn't be reaching out to Max anymore, and that since I'm going away to college, he wouldn't be a problem anymore. All of that. In August of 2014, I started my freshman year at the University of North Texas. After moving onto campus, Max started sending me several text messages every day, asking to hang out, ask me about my day, carrying on, our friendship as if he didn't just give me a notebook with terrible things written in it. I responded to some of those messages, but tried to distance myself without being too blunt. At this point, I was afraid and didn't want to potentially set him off. So I just, was being nice, but distant. One night he showed up to my dorm room. I hadn't told him which dorm I was staying in, so it was strange. He found out where I was. When I asked him how he knew where I was, he laughed and never told me. In September of that year, so September 2014, Dustin and I broke up, and against my better judgment, I ended up responding to one of Max's text messages. At the time, I think I did that because I knew he would be responsive and I just needed someone to talk to. He responded with feigned concern and was obviously turning the conversation towards me and him reconnecting. And this occurred for, 4 or 5 days, maybe a week. I started talking to my now partner, Anthony, in mid-October, like beginning October, mid-October. Anthony and I attended the same school since 5th grade and had many of the same classes, and he knew who Max was. I told Anthony that Max had been acting weird since I'd moved away to college, and Anthony suggested I cut off all contact with him. I was stubborn and told Anthony that Max was a friend and I couldn't just cut someone off like that. In my mind, I felt I needed to find a nice way to tell him that his behavior wasn't okay. Still at this point, felt responsible for his feelings since we had been so close previously. I felt that it was my job to nicely cut that off. At the end of October, Max called me and said he was in town and that he wanted me to meet his older sister who lived 10 minutes from campus. Max told me that she was a psychology major like I was, and that she would be able to give me advice on and options after school. With the potential of meeting someone like her who could give me advice, the fact that we would have been in public or the very least with someone else, and with the hope to have a conversation with him and sort of bury the hatchet, I decided to accept. I felt a sense of loyalty to Max, having been friends over the previous year, and I hoped he would see how he was acting and what he had done was not okay, and that we could somehow move past this and be close friends again. Max picked me up from my dorm room and drove about 10 minutes away to a nearby Comfort Inn and Suites, which was off the side of the highway. It's Interstate 35 in Denton, or Lake Dallas, I think technically is the city, and pulled into the hotel parking lot. I asked him why we were at the hotel, and he said he had booked a room for us for the night. I was shocked, and honestly, I couldn't move or even really speak. I started to panic just sort of shut down. I couldn't find the means to run or object to anything. Max opened the car door for me, and he took my hand, guiding me out. He led me into the side door of the hotel, and the room that he had booked was right off that side door. Once we got into the hotel room, there was only one bed, and that's whenever I started to cry. I asked him if he'd be mad if I left, and Max was laughing and said that we were just here to hang out and to catch up on our lives. He was standing like in the doorway and wouldn't let me walk past him. Anytime I tried to get out the door, he would hold my shoulders or my waist, and he would just stop me. Honestly, I can't remember all of what happened that night, as I've done all I could to forget and move past this memory for years, but I do know that I was scared and that I was held against my will for hours. I remember being on my period and asking if we could go to the store so I could get tampons, seeing this as a way to get out of the room. But Max said no. I ended up sleeping without a tampon or a pad that night because he wouldn't let me leave. I remember telling him that I was talking to a new guy and that we had plans to watch a movie that night. Max said that I was lying about the movie date and continued talking about his mom and his sister. I eventually was crying so hard that I just fell asleep. I woke up to Max's hand in my shirt. He was like rubbing my back all the way down to where my shorts were, and his fingers were inside of my shorts. I rolled over and asked him what he was doing. He just kind of smiled, super creepy, and said that he was watching me sleep. I looked at the clock and it was 9:42, and I told him I had a 10 a.m. chemistry class and that I had to leave. Max agreed to take me to campus for class, but he didn't agree to let me leave for any other reason. I was stuck in that hotel room from 8 p.m. the night before until 10 a.m. the next morning. I didn't tell anyone about this until years later. After this, I did not respond to any calls, texts, or emails for several weeks. Max would ask me if I was okay, how my day was. He'd tell me to be safe. I didn't respond to any of these messages. In December of 2014, I was closing at a restaurant that I was working at called Cowboy Chicken. And when I looked outside the window, I saw Max's car. I called Anthony and told him that Max was at my job. Anthony came and picked me up that night and told Max to leave us alone. Max was upset that I had started dating Anthony and accused Anthony of taking me away from him. After this night, Max texted me repeatedly asking why I chose Anthony over him. I continued to ignore the messages. He messaged me in late December, early January, can't remember when, saying that he was at my college campus, and I responded and said that I'm not there because it was winter break and I wasn't there. Max didn't reach out to me for a month or so after this. He said he was in the military and doing basic training in Arizona. I told him that he should focus on that, and he didn't respond. So I figured that would be the last I'd ever hear from him because I was pretty blunt about it. He started messaging me again in March of 2015 with really vague and ominous messages like, be safe, don't believe what they say. Anthony was also getting messages such as, keep her safe and you don't realize who you have, but we just ignored them and assumed Max was like on his shit again, right? Max texted Anthony early one morning. It was like after 2, before 5, like between 2 and 5, with a link to a video and a message that said, thanks, Anthony. In the video, Max was cutting his wrists. The video was posted on Anthony's Facebook page and he was tagged. Several of my friends reached out to me to ask what was going on. Anthony called emergency services to do a wellness check. We didn't hear from Max again until the summer when he wrote me like a 7 or 8 page letter saying how much he regretted joining the military.
I was in the United States Army before I was discharged for attempting to commit suicide.
As far as I know, his military career was only a few months long and ended with that suicide video or attempted suicide video. He told me about how he loved me and wished we were together. I didn't respond to it, nor did I keep it. I burned it in my grandma's backyard, actually. For the next 4 years, Max would intermittently find his way into my life. He left a coffee and a rose on my grandma's porch with a note saying, sorry for being a bad boy. I wasn't even living there at the time. My Nana called me and was really worried about it. He showed up at the Walmart near my apartment after I moved off campus, which was an hour away from his mom's house, who he was still living with at the time. He randomly showed up at an old friend's house to ask about me and crashed on their couch, which was hours away. It wasn't even that she lived close. She was going to college in like South Texas, and he showed up there. He sent Anthony an apology letter through Twitter and basically admitting to, a lot of these things and apologizing for it. He contacted Anthony over Twitter a few times after that. And in one DM asked Anthony to subscribe to his YouTube channel, which I think was focused on mental health videos and hentai review videos at the time. And when Anthony didn't respond, he got upset and said something like he thought he could get past it. He has no interest in ever associating with Anthony again, and then blocked him. He also expressed anger that Anthony had called in a wellness check because cops ended up coming along with EMS. At some point prior, he also accused Anthony of sending photos to a minor who was an old friend and who also happened to be Max's sister's best friend at the time that Max made the claim. Max never said more about that accusation, but said that if he were to ever end up dead, that he had arranged for the evidence to be released because he knew how you people are. He made these accusations and nothing else was said about it. We're not sure what that means. When Max posted a Q&A which had been deleted but was re-uploaded by a different channel. He mentioned me and described how I called the police on him. He also posted a handful of videos that contained references to me and even quick cuts where text would pop up on the screen that contained hidden messages for me.
And then I met her, and I loved her. And then I met her, and I loved her. And then she started to ignore me. Then she started to fear me. Then she started to hate me. Then she dropped all contact with me and called the cops on me.
Max found every apartment I lived in while living in Texas, 4 different apartment complexes. I had to break my lease early due to not feeling safe at one of them. While living in Texas, I had to notify jobs and employers of Max and show them pictures so that if he showed up, they could turn him away. Anthony had to do this too. There are many reports to the police on my behalf because of Max. It took me several years to admit that I had a stalker. I've been diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety as a direct result of being held against my will in that hotel room. Although I haven't had direct contact with Max since 2019, the repercussions of his actions have stuck with me to this day. I've had to go through several rounds of therapy to learn how to cope with the triggers he created, and it is still an ongoing process. I honestly thought I was done dealing with Max for the rest of my life, and believe me, I want to move on from this more than anything. But when Max and many of his fans and other content creators are denying the claims of women who have stepped forward, are harassing them and their families, and are making a joke of this whole thing, I can't stay silent and pretend I didn't go through what I went through. I survived the abuse of MamaMax, Max Harris, Max Stryker, Maximilian Murdoch, Maxine Rasmussen, or whatever other name or alias he wants to go by. I believe every single person who shares their abuse story about him, and I hope you do too.
My name is Lucy. You probably know me as Twigs. I used to go by, as well as Max referred to me as Lulu. My handle on Twitter used to be like Detective Twigs or just Twigs or King Twigs. I don't know, a shit ton of them. Anyway, I dated MamaMax when I was a minor at 17, from 2016 to 2018. So when I first met Max, he told me, online. I'm in Australia and he is in Texas. So, well, he was in Texas at the time. I'm not sure where he is now, but yeah. So we met online, obviously, on Twitter, I think it was. And I was 17 at the time. So my birthday is the 24th of October, 1998. So at the time I met Max, I was 17. I have some, I don't know, obviously, I've deleted Discords and Twitter accounts since. But we have some screenshots of people on Twitter referring to us as a couple and that we were dating, and we also have, I think it's in July of 2016, where he says he wants to cream pie me, which is sexual activity as a minor. At the time he told me he was 18, so that he was born 1998, the same as me, because I was turning 18 that year, which we know is incorrect now. His ID is from 1996. So he told me he was 18, and then it wasn't until after I turned 18 he told me he was lying about his age and that he was actually 20. So he not only lied about his age, but also dated me as a minor. I figured, because I was naive and young, that if he was born the same year as me, it doesn't really matter, you know. He's just turned 18 and I'm turning 18, so it was fine. But yeah, he was actually lying about his age and didn't tell me until I was actually of legal age, so he did that on purpose. He was talking about flying me over to Texas before I was 18 as well. Like as a minor, he was talking about flying me internationally to see him. He obviously was only planning to do that after I became an adult. And I just wanted to note as well, there would have been, I don't have any proof of it, obviously, and even if I did, I couldn't show it, but there would have been child pornography in that case, being shared, obviously, Snapchats and yada yada. I was a kid. Yeah, so that's 2016 when it began. I went to Texas in 2017, so I was a legal adult. I think at this time I was actually 19. We were together when I turned 18, and then when I turned 19 in October, I flew over that Christmas, so the Christmas of 2017. When I was 19, I stayed at Max's house in Dallas, well, in Wiley, Texas, with his family. So I know his entire family, even his extended family. I've met all of his siblings, his nephews and nieces. Yeah, so I'm well adept in that area. I stayed over the New Year period as well. I came back in January. Yes, it was like late January, almost February in 2018. And I've got some evidence of him phone calling me internationally as well around that time. So that's when we broke up, after I came back from Texas. So the reason for that is, I believe it was just after Christmas. It wasn't New Year's at that time. It was like the in-between period, the couple days between Christmas and New Year's, and we went to Six Flags in Arlington. I've got a photo of us, and I've got like a refill cup of the hot chocolate they had. That was the only night that I stayed away from Max's family. Like usually I was in his room in his family home. This was the first night. It was just the two of us on our own, and it was right next to Arlington, Six Flags in Arlington, where we stayed at Baymont by Windham, which is like an inn for when you're going to Six Flags. We stayed there actually the night before going to Six Flags itself, where that is where he sexually assaulted me. I don't have a police report to back that one up. I don't have any physical evidence either. It was, like I said, 2017. Sorry. I'm not going to go into the details of how he sexually assaulted me or anything, but yeah, that happened, and I was scared and embarrassed to not report it. And also, well, I was embarrassed because obviously I've been involved with this man for years online and went over internationally to see him, and I just thought, oh God, I'm so stupid. Like, I almost deserve this because I was so dumb. You know, like I thought that's what I deserve. Obviously I didn't, and no one does. So I didn't do anything about it. I just waited until my flight to go home, and then when I was safe back in Australia, I ended things with him, which is in the 2018 when he's tried to call me internationally, because I cut him off completely, pretty much. Yeah. I just wanted to make note of a couple of things as well about Max's narcissism, is that in evidence to back that up, he will never go to the women that he's seeing, they always have to come to him. He will pay for that. That's fine, because he is isolating you. He will, like, obviously for me, he paid for my flight to go to Texas, so he could, like, obviously afford to come over here, but he didn't. He wanted me over there so he could control me and isolate me, and obviously I couldn't drive at the time. I couldn't drive in America, so I relied on him for that. I relied on his family, and I relied on his place and his space. So it's a control factor. You know, for someone that says they have so much money, I don't know why he doesn't fly out to see these women. I mean, it's obvious. It's like a, he wouldn't sacrifice any of that for anyone. It's all about himself. Sorry. But yeah. I'm just thinking, like, of what I have evidence of to talk about. I don't want to talk about anything that I don't have, like, a photo to go with it. You can cut that out. It's fine. I mean, you can do whatever. Sorry, I'm so nervous right now and hungry. I'm gonna go get sushi in a second. I'm just loading up the Google thing. Yeah. Okay, never mind, it's not loading. I'll just leave it. Okay. So yeah. I've shown evidence that I was a minor. We've got evidence of him dating me as a minor. I've shown my ID with my my date of birth on it. Which is the main thing. The main thing is that I'm the only girl that we know of that he's dated as a minor. I think he learnt from that experience and knew not to do it again, which is why he waited until Ollie was 18. He was, you know, friends with her with the intention of taking it further when she was of legal age. So he's learnt from that. Or it could just be he thought of his image, because he knew that if online they found out he was dating a 17-year-old, regardless of the state's law, he would have looked bad. So Max is a massive narcissist. He takes advantage of insecure women and minors, evidently. He will isolate women and manipulate the situation to however, you know, whatever suits his narrative, which is evident by how he doesn't use Twitter. Like, this has been a work in progress for a while, and he has obviously knew that because of Craig's videos. But the reason why he hasn't tweeted about it is because you can't delete replies to tweets. If he tweeted and we replied, he couldn't delete that unless he deleted the original tweet, which isn't something he would do. He only does it through YouTube because you can delete comments. He only does it places where he can, you know, change the narrative to suit him, pretty much. So yeah. Not a nice guy. Yeah, I think also he's pretty much forgotten about like me. I think that's mainly because I'm in Australia. Like I said, most of his ex-girlfriends and women he's been involved with are in Texas or within the US, and he flies them out to him. That's evident by Paulina. He did the same with her, isolated her from everyone else. So I think he pretty much didn't think I was a threat being in a different country and just completely forgot The most concerning thing is how he has had, since being in school with Haley and up till now, he's been involved with so many other women, but he still holds on to Haley for some reason. Like Paulina said, how he used Haley's last name as an alias. I will have my Instagram and my Twitter in the description. So then if anyone has any other questions, then they can feel free to message me on that. I can go into more detail of certain things. Like, I obviously don't have... I'm not here to talk about the nitty-gritty. It's just the fact that I was a minor and he sexually assaulted me. He sexually assaulted me as an adult, but he dated me as a minor. That's basically what I've got to say. Anything else, feel free to contact me. And just wanted to make note of, just because I don't have a police report or any evidence of the sexual assault that happened outside of Six Flags Arlington, doesn't mean that I won't. Like, it doesn't mean that I can go and file a police report. I just, at the moment, don't really deem it necessary because I'm in Australia and he's in the US. But it's something that I would proceed to do if we need to take, like, larger legal action. But yeah, at the moment, it's just something I haven't thought about, really. But if necessary, then I will.
Hi guys, my name is Ali Wang, and unfortunately, I am one of Max's exes. How did we meet? So I had a friend, and he doesn't want me to say his name, but we had a mutual friend, and then our mutual friend invited me to go hang out with them. And it was me, my brother, my sister, and my friend, and Max, and we all went to Max's apartment. And we met him through a friend, but our mutual friend wasn't friends with him much longer than I was, so he didn't really know him that well himself. Okay. And then, and I never had a boyfriend before. I just turned 18 when we met. I was only a month 18, and I never had a boyfriend before. I never even, like, held hands with a boy. So and when I had a little crush on Max, he could obviously tell. I mean, like, we were hanging out. We just started hanging out, kind of. I don't know how it really happened. I don't remember how it happened. We just started hanging out because of our mutual friend. And then one day he came over and it was just us two, and we were in his car. And then he kind of just went in for a kiss. And then from there, we just hung out a lot and started dating. So Max is 4.5 years older than me. So 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And he turned 23 in January. January is his birthday. And September is my birthday. So he's turned 23 because we started dating December 1st. That was our, like, anniversary date, I guess. And then a month later, he turned 23. Yeah, after dating for, like, 3 months, we decided that he should move into my house. So he moved in with me and my parents. This is my parents' house. So he lived with me and my parents and my siblings. Okay, so at first, this was my first boyfriend, so I did not know how it was gonna go. I never even dated someone, like, short term or anything. So I didn't know what to expect, I guess. And he was, like, love bombing the fuck out of me, but I didn't know at the time that that's what it was. I thought we were just in love, you know? I thought it was, like, movie shit. And, but in reality, he was just trying to throw so much love at me so I think, oh, this is love. So when he stops doing that, I gotta think of that moment. Anyways, I worded that horrible, but it's okay. So in the beginning, I thought it was really great because he was love bombing me and kind of drowning me in his love. And he was so nice to me. And then we moved in together, and that's kind of when it went a little downhill. He started getting like neglectful and low-key kind of mean. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. And then he stopped talking to me. Like, we lived together and we had 2 separate rooms. We had like an office, and then we had a bathroom that connected, and then our room with the bed and stuff. And he would lock himself in his office and just sit in there all day. And then when I went to work, that's when he would go to sleep. Literally, he slept while I was at work for 8 hours. And then as soon as I came back home, he would go back in his office and lock himself in there. Yeah, actually, way after we broke up, he admitted that he was watching funky stuff. I don't know what YouTube censors. He was watching funky stuff all the time. He had an issue with it. And I think it started because I didn't want to get jiggy all the time. So there was a lot, like a ton of red flags, but again, he was my first experience in this. So I didn't know the difference between like red flags and green flags. And one of the huge, probably the biggest, and I should have known this one regardless of being knowledgeable. But the biggest red flag was when I was on my period and he was trying to convince me to go rubberless, I guess. And he was saying that you can't get pregnant on your period. Like, let's just do it. You can't get pregnant on your period. I was like, that just seems a little wrong. I just don't believe that. And then he was like, okay, I'll look it up. So he looks it up on his phone, and he's like, yeah, it says it right here, like, you can't get pregnant on your period. And then I was like, but can I see it? And he was like, oh, you don't trust me? You don't fucking trust me? I was like, I just want to see it, just for my own reassurance. And he refused to show me, and then like guilt tripped me, saying, oh, you don't trust me. And then I was like, oh, I don't want him to think I don't trust him. So obviously I did what he asked. And then immediately afterwards, I go to the bathroom and I look it up myself, and it was obviously wrong. You can't get pregnant on your period. And I cried and I cried and then I cried. So that was the biggest red flag. Yeah. That was so stupid of me to even like let that happen. But I'm trying to think of another red flag. He would just do shit like that all the time, like try to convince me to do something, and if I didn't want to do it, he would guilt trip me into do it. So that was his biggest red flag. Just doing shit like that. And I feel stupid not realizing it sooner. So before, he was locking himself in his room watching funky adult stuff. He would try, and while I was sleeping, he would come in the room and try to get jiggy with me. And there was times where I was like, no. And then he would like get angry. And he keeps claiming that I was like asked for it, and I really didn't. I think I did give him permission, and then he did it, and then I was like, I don't like it at all, actually. I hate this. And he didn't really take it seriously when I took it back. So yeah, he would do that, and he did it a lot. Like, probably for like a month straight, he was just doing it. And like, it was like at 7 a.m. when I was sleeping hard. He would just come and wake me up like that. So actually, that's when we broke up and we lived together. When we broke up, and the day I broke up with him, the day right after, he moved out. Like, got all of his shit and moved out. So, but I broke up with him because he was being so super neglectful. I did not break up with him for the actual things that he did to me, because at the time I didn't realize, and I thought, oh, he's my boyfriend, it can't be this or it can't be that, because I thought it's your boyfriend. But even though it is your boyfriend, girlies, it is still that. Okay, anyways. So he moved out the day after, and then and I felt literally like so much weight was lifted off of me. I was like relieved that I was like, finally I fucking did that, because this is something that was on my mind for a minute, wanting to break up with him. And when I finally did it, I cried like tears of like relievedness. Like I was like, fuck, finally. So I wasn't really heartbroken, because it's something I was already heartbroken over like a month ago in my head. And then he kept coming over after a week, and like at like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And he kept coming over uninvited. I didn't really invite him at all. And I did not want to see him, but he wanted to see me. And then finally my mom called him and was like, if you do this again, I'm going to call the cops on you, because you're coming like so late and they're asleep and uninvited. That's probably the biggest issue. But then he knew my family schedule. He knew when my parents went to work. He knew when my brother went to work. And he knew when I went to work. And he came at a point where he knew my parents were gone. And it was right before my shift at Subway. And he came in my room and he shut the door and he locked it, like uninvited. And I was just sitting on my bed across the room doing my makeup for work. And I was just like, what the fuck are you doing here? And then he's like, please take me back, Olivia, please, I regret everything, like I'll do better this time, like I promise. And then he was just crying and saying that he wants me back. And I was like, no, I don't want to be with you, like get the fuck out of my house, like this is fucking scary. And then I told him no. So then he got angry. Like he went from like, I'm so sad, to like instantly when I said no, like he was angry. And then that's when it got even scarier. And so I had his mom's necklace, and I was so, like, he was trapping me in my room, so I threw it at him. And then trying to get him out, I don't know why I thought that would work. But then he throws it back way harder than I threw it. And then there's a box next to my door with, like, miscellaneous shit, and it had a webcam that he gave me. It was a Logitech webcam. And he threw it at me. He just kept throwing shit at me. And the webcam, he threw it so hard that it broke, like, in half. Yeah. And then at that point, I'm just fucking bawling. And I'm like, get the fuck out of my house. Like, my parents are almost home. I have to go to work. Like, get the fuck. And then as soon as he heard my parents are almost home, that's when he was like, fine, I'll leave. And then he left. And then after that, after he left, maybe like a couple days later, he told everyone I cheated on him, which I never ever cheated on him. He called me. He kept spam calling me. And this is when I started working at Walmart. So like literally a week I was working at Subway, now I'm working at Walmart. And he calls me on my breaks at Walmart and telling me that he was like so fucking mad at me because I started dating another guy, even though we were broken up, and he told everyone I cheated on him, even though we were not together. He told me he was gonna unalive himself. He told me that I unalived our children, and like within the relationship in the beginning, you know, like people like come up with, oh, our future baby names, and all the names we made up, he listed them off, saying, oh, you killed this baby and that baby. And like, what about like my little girl? Like, she's dead because of you. That's what he fucking was yelling at me on the phone, and I'm just on my break at Walmart, like fucking crying, because like, how could you say, threatening to unalive himself? And I didn't know what to do in this situation. So I think I texted his sister and his mom, and I was like, can you check on Max? He's telling me a lot of scary stuff. And I don't like it. And then after he told everyone, like all of his friends were telling me how big of a piece of shit I am, and how they never seen Max hurt like this before. And then I was like, I never cheated on him. And they were like, you're a fucking liar. And then his fans are mad at me, telling me to K-word myself. And it was just a little wild. I never cheated on him. And then, you know what the crazy part is, too, is that maybe a year and a half later, the same friend that was like, you're a fucking liar, you're a piece of shit, told me that, like, hey, I just hope you know you're right about Max. Like, he is a piece of shit. And I was like, I literally told y'all that. But whatever. Oh, and something I do want to note is that when we first started dating and he was like love bombing me and shit, he was telling me about how horrible Lucy was and about how horrible Haley was. And he told me him and Haley dated, which Haley told me they never did. So, and then he told me that Lucy cheated on him. He told me that Sarah cheated on him. He told me that Haley like led him on and cheated on him. He told me all of his girlfriends were fucking horrible. And like obviously I believed him because we were dating. And then as soon as we broke up, and then a week later, he did the same exact thing to me. So then I was like, so I bet you none of his ex-girlfriends actually did any of that shit. And they're not the crazy ones. He's just making shit up. Like, and he's doing the same fucking process every fucking girlfriend. And like, Paulina and Lucy have told me stories that he's done to them. And I have such similar stories. And that's why I know they're 100% telling the truth, because how could they have something so similar happen to them? I never told them what happened to me, but it's something like just in our own way, in our own time frames. So he's just doing the same shit to different girls. So, yeah. And then he somehow convinced me to be his friend again, because he's like, Max is fucking smart. That's the thing. Like, people think I'm, like, calling him dumb. No, he's smart. He's smart as shit, and he knows exactly what the fuck he's doing. And he's, like, really good with making people like him. So he convinced me to be his friend again. And we were hanging out one day, and our friends were supposed to be there at this movie. And somehow they all canceled, and it was just me and him. And so we go watch the movie. And he's trying to hold my hand and shit. I'm like, Max, this isn't a date. Like, I just want to make that very aware this isn't a date. And I said that straight up. So, like, I wasn't giving him any, like, signals or, like, anything. I was very clear that this was not a date. And then we go back to my house, and then we're sitting on my bed, kind of, like, right in front of each other. And I'm wanting to show him my new favorite song. It was such a cute song. And I was playing it, and I was, like, kind of, and my room was, like, dim. And I was swaying to it with my eyes closed, just listening to it. And then all of a sudden, he just kisses me. Like, even though I've said this is not a date 100 times, he still just went and just fucking kissed me. And then at that moment, I told him, like, get the fuck out of my house. And then I was angry with him all over again. And I didn't want to see him anymore. And he knew I didn't want to see him anymore. And this is where the screenshots of his conversation with my brother come in. He tried to convince my brother to lie for him, so he had an excuse to come and see me. And in the screenshots, he even says, I don't want her to be in a position of power. No one says that unless they're fucking insane, you know? So he didn't want me to be in a position of power, because if he came to me, he saw it as I was, like, higher than him or something. And I would have never even thought of it like that in my own head. Like, I would have never thought, oh, I'm in a position of power right now. Like, that's not something, it's like, that's not something that goes through my fucking brain. But it goes through his, and he didn't want me to be, like, in a position of power, I guess. So he wanted to lie to me. And he wanted my brother to lie to me. And my brother was like, no, I don't feel comfortable doing that. The red line in the screenshot is crossed out because it involves my brother's ex-girlfriend, and my brother doesn't want her involved because she had no part of the story. But yeah, there was just a bunch of little shit that Max did that was horrible. And I didn't realize it was horrible at the time. And now I do. the odds of Max having 4 horrible girlfriends that did all the same shit to him is crazy. And how the fact that we've all come forward and said similar statements at separate times with no contact with each other, and it's a little insane. Like, how would we all just come together and lie like that? Like, I didn't even know their names. And I didn't even know Paulina existed, and she had a similar story to me. So, like, the odds of him actually having 4 crazy ex-girlfriends that are just lying about this whole situation is a little crazy. And the fact that Haley wasn't even his fucking girlfriend ever, it's all a little crazy. I don't know. I believe their stories, and because they were so similar to mine. So, yeah.